Yep. Thank you, Camilla. My name is Peter Holland. I'm from Preem, and just to explain the name, as many Norwegians may think this is something you put on the bread. It is not. It's the first half of preeminence, and that's the explanation of the name Preem. And preeminence is really what we're trying to achieve in everything we do. Preem runs 2 refineries in Sweden, one in Lysekil and one in Gothenburg on the Swedish west coast. Very short, we are 1,500 employees roughly. Our revenue is around 93 billion SEK in 2018. We have 80% of the Swedish refining capacity and 30% of the Nordic countries' refining capacity, which makes us the biggest refining company in the Nordic countries actually. And we're delivering around 50% of the transportation fuels that are consumed in Sweden every year. We have a market share ourselves at around 35%, and then we sell to competition, so 50% roughly. Just to put us in perspective how big this is. With this significant position, we are an important part of the CO2 emission calculation in Sweden, of course. And this is the emissions in Sweden that's included in Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, which is then Preem's responsibility, or Preem can impact in a way. It's about 1.5 million ton of emissions coming from the raw materials that we take in. That's not something we emit, but it's part of the raw materials production, the crude oil production. Then we emit around 2 million tons totally in our 2 refineries in Gothenburg and Lysekil as part of the refining process. And then our products, when they are consumed by our customers, emit another 16 million ton of CO2. That's how we look at it and how we then look at our challenge. How can we work on this? For this presentation, I will only talk about the 2 in the middle. I'm in another presentation later on, which I will talk about the 16 there, which I'm sure many also are interested in. But part of the solution here is that we are transferring more and more production from the fossil over to the renewables. So our 16 million ton in the customer phase will then reduce to 3.5, which I will not get into any details here. But as we do that, we also buy more and more renewable products, which will then take down the emission from the raw material side down from 1.5 to 0.4. And as we then take those green raw materials into our refineries and combine with CCS, which I'll talk a little bit more about now, we see ourselves getting down to 0. And actually, eventually, when the green production increases even further, we will take this down to negative numbers. I'll get to that. So we are part of the EU ETS system. That's what's controlling our emissions. Preem production is controlled by ETS. We get our quotas through the Swedish Naturvårdsverket every year, which is then part of the European ETS total system. And that is, as we heard in the previous presentation, that is going down every year. It's been reduced 2.2% currently, may increase further. So that's sort of our case for action. So that's also part of the reason why we are one of the 7 that has signed a memorandum of understanding with the Northern Light Project. And we are very actively working now to get into this system, this infrastructure, to get rid of the CO2 which we will capture. Because that's always been a sort of a challenge for us. We have been challenged by authorities for many years actually on our high CO2 emissions. We are the 5th largest CO2 emitter in Sweden. So we have had that attention, and we have sort of been working this for many years. The question has always come up. We can make it more efficient, and we do that all the time. And our 2 refineries, actually Gothenburg refinery, is the least CO2 emitting refinery in Europe per liter produced. It's number 1. And Lysekil refinery is number 4 on that list. So if you want to become more efficient, it's like squeezing water out of a rock. It's not much to gain from that. So you need to get then into the next phase. You need to get into the engineering phase. If you don't want to reduce production, which we don't, you need to capture the CO2. That's why this is so important. And we have sort of then been challenged on that. So why don't you capture it? Fine, we capture it. But then, government, what do you want us to do with it? And there is no answer to that, of course, until now, with this structure. Now we have an infrastructure that if we can capture, there will be in we heard now, I heard approval in 2020, I heard now approval in 2020, maybe 2021, but there is an infrastructure on its way here. Really, really important for the trust and the progress of this project, really, because it's all depending on that. Why do we want to focus on this? And I just highlight, most people in here know, but IPCC, the EU 2050 strategy, and also the Paris Agreement, all of them, they raise CCS and carbon capture. That's the next stage. We need to get there. We need to do this to solve this. And we strongly believe that we have already made our refineries as efficient as we can be. We need to get to this next stage. And we see this a tremendous opportunity, because if we can start to capture CO2 in the fossil phase that we are today, we will gradually then develop the CCS technology to capture, to avoid buying quotas, because we can't afford that. If you have to buy quota, you cannot sell the last liter you produce. It's not going to, the economics not going to work. So instead, you have to reduce. So we need to buy enough quota, or create enough free quotas by capturing, so that we can continue to produce at max capacity. But as you, at the same time, gradually transition to more and more green products, you will, over a period of time, quite quickly, actually, within the next 10 years, possibly, we will start to capture quite a big amount of green molecules. So you get into negative territory, maybe not in the first 10 years, but in the second 10 years, within 10 to 20 years, we will then get into the becoming a carbon sink. That's our vision going forward here. Because in Sweden, there will be more and more green products. I'm not going to talk about that, but there's a law now introduced that will force fossil out as transportation fuels and force green alternatives in, including liquid renewable transportation fuels. So this has a tremendous engineering and very interesting prospect and revision on that side, but it's also very necessary, because the quotas, the CCS quotas that is distributed by the EU ETS system, is going to be reduced by 2.2% every year from now to and forward. And that may actually increase. There is a new parliament coming in. They think 2.2% is way too low. They may raise this. And that's going to be very interesting, but it's just over 10 years here. There will be 20%, 22% less quotas. And either you capture 20% then of your current emissions, or you reduce your production. That's the alternative we're facing. And we're not going to reduce, so we're going to capture. This is just an indication of where things are heading right now. Very strong. This is money for us. This is real money, and it's happening. So people that think that Preem is greenwashing or something, we hear that sometimes. I just show them this thing. You think we're greenwashing. This is the alternative. And God knows where that one ends. So some important prerequisites that we need to have there is that the technology need to develop, and we see that. There's many, many companies now working on carbon capture. The percentage, how much carbon can you capture, is often the question. That is moving all the time, and it's becoming better all the time. This trade with the emission rights is very good. We think that's the right way to do it. You got to put money under this, otherwise it will just be words. But however, there's an important element in this, that we cannot just do this up in here in the Nordic countries or in Europe. We need to look abroad. And especially that last one at the bottom I put in bold letters, that we have, the way it's been working up till now is that the Nordic countries and European countries have very big ambitions, putting a lot of tariffs and restrictions on their own industry, while the door is way open for import. They say if you want to import products from India or Saudi Arabia or wherever you want to produce it, you're welcome. Come into Europe with your products. No questions asked. While internally, a lot of questions is asked. And so that's need to change. There need to be some sort of a customs, a control out there, a tariff, that if you want to produce something abroad, send it into Europe, you need to pay the same CO2 emission fee that I just showed, that sort of quota price. And I know that the new commission is working on that, and that needs a lot of support to the extent there are politicians listening on this from Norwegian government and other governments. We need to have this in place before we can move on and become really, really sophisticated about this. So with this nice picture from Lysekil, I say thank you.